Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Hope you are fine and hope you are maintaining rules and regulation regarding health, which has been instructed to you time again by our teachers to keep away COVID-19 or coronavirus. So today I am going to take my second class. You just look at the topic, today's topic. Heart of darkness. So if you look at the picture, if you look at the cover pages of two textbook here, both are of Heart of Darkness. You can see at the left a very dense forest, impenetrable forest, and the right picture you can see a steamer is entering into a forest which is also deep. Now you look at another three cover pages of the textbook, and at the right you can see a black heart, and amidst it will find the texture of jungles. I am going to discuss about two major topics of Heart of Darkness today. One is the plot and another is the structure and form and structure of the novel. The plot. At the very beginning we find Marlowe observes that this land was once a place of darkness, an uncivilized wilderness. So you can go to page 30 and 31 of my text, in fact page 4 of chapter 1. So I am quoting from the text. You simply listen to me. I was thinking of very old times when the Romans first came here 1900 years ago. The other day light came out of this river. Since you say nights, yes, and in the same passage if you simply move forward you will find some fascinating lines or sentences. A sky the color of smoke, a kind of sheep about as rigid as concertina, and going up the river with stores or waters or what you like, sandbanks, marshes, forests, savages. So you proceed. You will find the comparison between Roman colonizer and the modern colonizers. So again you move to the Marlowe's reflection, which leads him to remember his own experience when he commanded a steamboat on the Congo River. In both the cases there is a comparison to portray the theme of colonization. So you have to read page 4, 5 and 6 very carefully of chapter 1, which is very important to sort out your answers. In this tale, Marlowe is a young man eager to see the unexplored African jungles. An influential aunt in Brussels secures him an appointment as a captain of a Congo steamer. So after a few pages you will find the delineation of Brussels, the capital of Belgium, and you will find biblical references to Brussels as a Cephalgas city. At Company's outer station in Africa, the plot goes on to the outer station in Africa. So, we are now moving to Company's outer station in Africa. There you will find three very grim, very desperate and very devastating aspects of black slavery or black slaves. Along with it, you will find white greed, violence and savagery. So, now we move to Company's outer station in Africa. Here you will find three green or devastating aspects of the black slaves. So the remarkable points you can write down here are black slavery, white greed, violence and savagery, and number 3, sickly African workers have been left unattended to die. So I move to the text again, page 16 and 17 of chapter in my text. You go and you will see. Once, I remember, we came upon a man of war, anchored off the coast. There wasn't even a shade there, and she was shelling the bush. It appears the French had one of their wars going on thereabouts. Her ensign dropped limp like a rag. The muzzles of the long 6-inch guns struck out all over the low hull of greasy, slimy swell, swung her up lazily and let her down, showing her thin masts in the empty immensity of earth, sky and water. She was incomprehensible, firing into a continent. So you know, the French warship was firing into the Black Africa indiscriminately. He further says in the same passage, then was a touch of intensity in the proceeding, a sense of lugubrious drollery in the sight, and it wasn't dissipated by somebody on board assuring me earnestly there was a camp of natives. You go to the next page and you will see the appalling condition of the black slaves. A slight clinking behind me made me turn my head. 6 black men advanced in a file, toiling up the path. They walked erect and slow, balancing small baskets full of earth on their heads, and the clink kept time with their footsteps. Black rags were wound round their loins, and the short ends behind waggled to and fro like foils. I could see every rib. The joints of their limbs were like knots in a row. So he further says, they were called criminals, and the outraged law, like the bursting shells. In the next page, he says, they were dying slowly. It was very clear. They were not enemies, they were not criminals, they were nothing earthly now, nothing but black shadows of disease and starvation lying confusedly in the greenish gloom brought from all the recesses of the coast in all the legality of time contracts, lost in uncongenial surroundings, fed on unfamiliar food, they sickened, became inefficient, and were then allowed to crawl away and rest. And about white greed, Marlowe observes, and Marlowe narrates this to his fellow sailors. I have seen the devil of violence, and the devil of greed, and the devil of hot desire, but by all the stars, these were strong, lusty, red-eyed devils. They swayed and drove man. So, his narration here actually make a query whether they are human being or not. And if we go back to the next page, before that, you see, he also means the company's very profit chief accountant, who mentions a certain Mr. Coutts, a remarkable agent who has sent more ivory back from the jungle than the other agents combined. Here we find Coutts' efficiency as a prolific plunderer. Marlowe's interest in Coutts will grow eventually into an obsession and becomes the focus of the story. So the plot antagonists actually Marlowe's growing interest about Mr. Coutts. Then we go to the central station. After an overland track, Marlowe arrives at the company's central station, where he learns that the steamer he was supposed to command has been wrecked. He then meets the local manager, an unlikable and unfeeling man, who mentions that Mr. Coutts is remote to be ill at his station upriver, and it is essential to get to him as soon as it is possible for them. One night, as others are fighting a blaze in one of the sheds, Marlowe talks with one of the agents at the station, a brickmaker. The brickmaker speaks of Coutts with admiration but also resentment at the talents that make him such a likely candidate for promotion. According to the brickmaker, Coutts is one of those agents who have come to Africa not merely for gain, but with the novel idea of spreading enlightenment across the backward continent. So, there is a compare with Marlowe. Marlowe's aunt also predicted that, or thought that Marlowe would be the torchbearer. Marlowe would actually bring enlightenment to the black continent. So the cases with Mr. Coutts. But here as the brickmaker mentions about the promotion, we see that amidst alienation and amidst darkness, amidst savagery, they do not forget about their promotion. And the promotion depends on the more ivory they can send to Brussels. Next page, at the beginning of chapter 2, that is very important. One evening on the deck of the steamer, Marlowe overhears a conversation between the manager and his uncle, an explorer. It is obvious that the manager despises Coutts, partly for his ideals and partly for Coutts' abilities. After 3 months of repairs, Marlowe, the manager, and a crew of 3 or 4 whites and some 30 Africans begin the tedious voyage upriver to Coutts' station. The journey upriver to Coutts' station, that is very important. The journey went on and on through a jungle that strikes Marlowe as weird, forbearing, and gigantic. So we now try to discover how dense the forest is, how weird the forest is. So page 6 of chapter 2, you move. So here you can find the density of the forest. Going up the river was like traveling back to the earliest beginning of the world, when vegetation rioted on the earth and the big trees were kings, an empty stream, a great silence, an impenetrable forest. The air was warm, thick, heavy, sluggish. There was no joy in the brilliance of sunshine. The long stretches of the waterway ran on, deserted, into the gloom of overshadowed distances. On silvery sandbanks, hippos and alligators sunned themselves side by side. Then further he says, till you thought yourself bewitched and cut off forever from everything you had known once, somewhere far away in another existence perhaps. So here we find the ample example of wilderness. Then you move to the next page. A couple morning later, they awaken, surrounded by a thick fog, through which they hear a tumult of threatening cries. Actually, it was the black natives who were going to attack them. The more they proceed to Quds's world, so the more enigmatic and melodramatic it eventually becomes. And the following incidents will prove it. Marlowe's observation of the reaction of the white and black man on board the steamer during the horrific cry prior to the actual attack by the African natives. The desire of the headsman to catch and eat a black attacker make Marlowe horrified. Even at the moment of such a crisis of survival, Marlowe dig deep into typical primitive human character amidst wilderness. So here you will find the plot is very much integrated, especially Marlowe's when Marlowe's mentioned about the wilderness and about the intention of the headsman to catch and kill and eat. We penetrated deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness. It was very quiet there. At night, sometimes the roll of drums behind the curtain of trees would run up the river and remain sustained faintly. Then he further says, we were wanderers on prehistoric art, on an art that owed the aspects of an unknown planet. The prehistoric man was cursing us, praying to us, welcoming us, who could tell. So he sets a very congenial atmosphere or environment to launch, where actually the herdsman actually desires to catch and eat fellow human being. So before that, we just move to page 11 of chapter 2. You will find it. Complaining clamor, modulated in savage discourse, filled our ears. The sheer unexpectedness of it made my hair stir under my cap. I don't know how it struck the others. To me, it seemed as though the mist itself had screamed. So the appalling cry threatened them. Then he further says in the next page, will they attack? When somebody attacked, he says, it was very curious to see the contrast of expression of the whole man of the black fellows of our crew, who were as much a stranger to that part of the river as we, though their homes were only 800 miles away. So the difference between the black and the white sailors on board were very much or are very much evident here, because both are unknown to this region, but their reactions are different. Why? Then Marlowe, at that very point of attack, when he needs to involve in some sort of action immediately, instead he thinks about the primitive human characters or characteristics. When the headsman, black headsman, reveals his desire, he said curtly, and leaning his elbows on the rail, looked out into the fog in a dignified and profoundly pensive attitude. I would no doubt have been properly horrified had it not occurred to me that he and his chaps must be very hungry. that they must have been growing hungry. So anyway, after a few pages you will see they still belongs to the beginnings of time, had no inherited experience to teach them, as it were. And of course, as long as there was a piece of paper written over in accordance with some farcical law, then he tried to justify their intention to kill fellow human being and eat. The thought of cannibalism overpowers his mind. He thinks about the fatal attack that is going to come in front. Why in the name of all the annoying devils of hunger they didn't go for us? They were 30 to 5 and have a good luck in for once. Good luck in for once amazes me now when I think of it. So the thought of cannibalism overpowers Marlowe's actions. Anyway, after that they try to regain normalcy. Now look at the screen. Once the fog lifts, they set sail again. Suddenly, they are assailed by shower of arrows. Here comes the attack. As the white men on board fire hysterically and ineptly into the brush, Marlowe steers close to the shore to avoid a snag. That means any difficulties or obstacles. At the very moment his African helmsman get a spear between the ribs, Marlowe jerks at the steam whistles, and as it screeches, the attackers flee in terror at the noise. He casts the dead helmsman overboard in order to keep the hungry cannibal crew from being tempted by such a meal. So the man died on board was an obstacle, or is an obstacle to Marlowe. So he has thrown the dead body. Next, we move to inner station. Here, they are greeted enthusiastically by a young Russian sailor, whose character is also important, who has been nursing Quds through a grave illness. The wilderness, we learn, preyed on Quds' nerves, and he began to go mad. And Quds participated in many unspeakable rites, maybe beheading the heads of the opposition. He scrawled at the end of a high-toned, idealistic report about improving the savages through benevolence. So the reports were spreading all over Africa that Mr. Quds appeared here for benevolence. In fact, as Marlowe learns, Quds' benevolence is exterminate all the brutes. So Mr. Quds virtually tried to annihilate all the brutes. Although the Russian is a fanatical admirer of Quds' brilliance, he admits that Quds seized his ivory from the African through violence, brutality, and intimidation. So the Russian reveals about Quds' own motive, Quds' activities. Marlowe notices that the posts in front of the station house are crowned with human heads. Mr. Quds finally appears, borne on a stretcher. So Mr. Quds cannot walk now. Now, Marlowe is well aware that Quds doesn't want to leave jungle as he is treated as God here. He is also aware that with a word to his African army, Quds could have them all slaughtered, but Quds actually is not going to do it because Quds is fatally ill, he thinks. But Quds allowed himself to be carried aboard the steamer, although a magnificent and ferocious African woman seems to ready to lead another attack. The manager tells Marlowe he disapproves Mr. Coutts, not because of his brutality, but only because his savage methods have made further plundering of the districts temporarily difficult, which is very important to notice that, because so much plunderings by Mr. Coutts have made this district difficult for further plundering or further looting. The young Russians visits Marlowe and discloses that the earlier attack on the steamer was ordered by Coutts. So, Coutts actually hindered or laid obstacle in front of them to reach to him. The Russian then steals away into the jungle. He fears the manager, who hates him because his ivory trading gives the company competition. Late that night, Coutts escapes and crawls ashore, but Marlowe discovers his absence and cuts him off before he reaches his followers' camps. So it was Coutts' desperate attempt to reach to his followers' camps and to lead an attack, most probably. They make a tense departure the next day, surrounded by warriors who seem to ready to attack under the leadership of the barbaric woman. But Marlowe sounds the whistle and frightens them off. As they steam back downriver, Coutts dies slowly. On his deathbed, Coutts is finally able to realize his deeds as he cries, the horror, a moment of truth full of illumination visited him that virtually eluded his imagination, thought and conscience during his abominable and barbaric stay in Africa. That is very important. Then, Marlowe too is taken by fever and very nearly dies, but eventually he survives and returns to Brussels, where more than a year after Coutts' death, he pays a visit to Coutts' intendant, the woman he was engaged to marry. She is still mourning for her lost beloved Coutts, heartbreakingly devoted to the memory of a man she thinks was a noble and generous to the end. But in reality, we observe the sheer contrast of Mr. Coutts' life. Marlowe finally doesn't shatter her illusion about Mr. Coutts, as he lies to woman by saying that Coutts' last word was her name. So at the end of the novel, Marlowe gives us a message, or Conrad gives us a message, that is, illusion is sometimes very important for survival. Now, we discuss about form and structure, or I am going to discuss about form and structure particularly. Heart of Darkness is structured as a journey of discovery, both external and internal discovery. So you know, both external discovery, the jungle, the density of the jungle, the countenance of the blacks, African slave, the greed of the white people, the interactions, everything. And the internal discovery is the discovery into human heart, the dark aspects of human heart. The deeper Marlowe penetrates into the heart of the jungle, the deeper he delves within himself. So Marlowe's own discovery with the discovery of Mr. Coutts is also important. The climax is when Coutts has been revealed for the disgrace he is, Marlowe has also learned about himself, and Marlowe returns to civilization with this new knowledge gained through horrific experiences. The novel resembles the development of the modern novel, most notably Forrest, Fracturing of Time, which is very important, the fracturing of time. Marlowe doesn't tell his tale straight from beginning to end. He frequently skips from an early event to a late event and returns again. Thus we get Marlowe's impression and evaluation of Coutts' behavior close to the chapter 2. But Coutts himself doesn't appear on the scene until somewhere into chapter 3. And another very important aspects of the structure or his narrative technique is his digression, his interruption. Nor would a typical 19th century narrator interrupt a build-up of suspense like the deception of the steamer waiting to be attacked in the fog with a lengthy digression of cannibalism and self-restraint. So you can find the ample examples in page number 11, 12 and 13 and 14 of chapter 2. But Conrad does it very successfully. So you know, when he needs to react promptly he dig deep into the thought of human characteristics, the primitiveness of human characteristics. So Marlowe imparts the thoughts as they occur to him. That is another technique by Marlowe. He doesn't suggest anything directly or narrate anything directly. He reveals something as they occur to him suddenly or abruptly. Conrad was trying to find a form that more closely followed the contours of human thought, a less artificial form than the traditional novel. Hence, the forward and backward leaps, the interruptions and digressions, frequent comparison and contrast and illusions. So, you can find it throughout the novel. And later famous novelists, notably James Joyce and William Faulkner, took these experiments with fractured time and space much further. So we see how successfully Marlowe has actually adopted a new technique here, and which very successfully has been spread among the other modern novelists. So here we concludes today's topic. Now, I think you have listened to me carefully. I said before, you have to go to the text, you have to read the text very properly. Unless and until you read the text thoroughly, you will not be able to understand the narrative techniques of Joseph Conrad and the diction of Joseph Conrad and his fascinating language or linguistic skill. The next class, in the following class or the forthcoming class, I am going to discuss about the characters, especially the major characters like Marlowe and Coutts. I will discuss another minor characters also. So till then, I hope you have enjoyed the class and you have taken the remarkable notes. So till the next class, goodbye. Assalamu alaikum.